Hey, fellow G&Ters, those of us who like our spirituality with a twist. So we are back talking about the Dalai Lama. We had this kind of sequence we were doing. We like to do things in little series spread across the weeks. And so this is the one we were doing on the Dalai Lama and his way of presenting what enlightenment looks like. So it was all kind of sparked by this idea that we thought, well, we should talk about what this enlightenment thing might be. As I was thinking about the episodes, Daniel, I was like, well, we're doing it from sort of a Buddhist-y point of view. Enlightenment, like we said in the beginning, might mean different things to different people, but we wanted to talk about what this thing kind of is, at least in the Buddhist way, because it gives you some feeling of what this might look like just overall, something like that. Yeah. All right. So we got to the point where we were talking about one of the really creative things that struck me when I started studying in this Dalai Lama school was the idea that you meditate on enlightenment. That's your meditation.
Right.
And so meditation, it works kind of in both ways. How do you get to this like special, more enlightened state? Well, you meditate on it. What's the purpose of meditation? Well, to create this thing. So it kind of like is two sides of the same idea. And so we started talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at how the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Book of the Bardo is a big influence in this idea that you meditate on all the more superficial parts of yourself falling away. This body, these emotions, these concepts and thoughts, these inner goals and drives, all the deepest parts of yourself, to the very like subtle aspects, your very subtle yin and yang aspects, if you want to talk a little Chinese with it. And then eventually you'll hit this thing, which is sort of the root of every human being, which is this idea of this clear light mind. If you listen to Dalai Lama, that's how he will talk about it. You could also just use this little handy phrase, Buddha nature.
And Eric, just for our audience, like the episodes that you're talking about, you're referencing would be like the episodes that we called them separation of yin and yang, and then probably one known as emanations of enlightenment. So if you haven't heard those episodes yet, and Eric is talking now, and you're like, what's he talking about? Those are the episodes that we kind of, we talk about this through various means in different episodes, but those were specifically the ones that you're referencing right now.
Yeah, kind of like around the Dalai Lama, especially too.
Yeah.
We're always in this a little bit of a funny thing here, Daniel and I, because we're like, where do we start talking about this stuff?
Right.
Because we don't want to be redundant to previous episodes too much, because you're like, well, I already heard that shit in the previous episode. Yeah. I don't want to hear it again.
Entertain me, monkey.
Well, it's also like blah, blah, blah about the thing
Right.
we already did. So anyways, so this is this idea of Buddha nature. I like we like Taoism too. You could call this your original Shen or your Yuan Shen, right? I don't know. I mean, no matter what tradition, there's probably a word for it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we have a word for this. Everyone will have a word for wherever this thing is, right?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of, soul is sort of like in the general lexicon, I think whether that translates or each culture has a different definition, of soul. I think, not just in the Chinese medical tradition, but in other cultures, some Mongolian cultures. I was talking about it with Mary Kay, and she's like, they also have aspects of the soul, just like how Chinese medicine does, and for people who are Chinese medicine folks, they'll understand this. And if you're not a Chinese medicine folk and are just, kind of tuning in, basically like there's different aspects of the soul, like how light has different colors, as if like the rainbow is a different aspects of visible light. So, when we're talking about the Shen or the soul, there are various viewpoints, and we have, not ad nauseum, but like, talked about these things a lot. And this is kind of where our further elucidation.
We're going to talk about it more.
That's right. That's right.
Because it's the inevitable thing you end up talking about, right?
Yeah,
it is like the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in Kabbalah, they'll have different parts of the person, right? You'll have it in like Sufism and things like that, right? All of our favorite stuff, it's going to be like, this is I know what you call it. Like it's a quintessential idea, right?
Yeah. And Eric, what was it in Kabbalah? I know I've mentioned it before, but you said they view it kind of like the soul is like a part of a mirror that has been splintered, and that we are capturing.
Oh, there is this whole thing about like the whole universe is kind of shattered.
There we go. Like,
yeah. I guess we'll do that when we do our big like Kabbalah episode, and we have guests who want to come on to talk about that too. So
yeah.
More to come on that subject matter.
Yeah.
The weird thing for me is just like in my travels of doing this, which is what inspires us to do a lot of this stuff here, is you start to realize all of these similarities
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this is very satisfying,
Mhm.
because obviously people coming at this from different perspectives seem to come up with very similar conclusions, which makes
Mhm.
you feel like, oh, there's probably something here.
Mhm.
Or in any case, it feels satisfying to learn from different people. You're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, because you learn, even if you come to the similar conclusions, you learn different things from different people.
It's definitely been my experience.
Yeah, and it sort of helps to fill in the gaps. You're like, oh, I never,
Yeah.
the way they look at it, that makes total sense to me, which is, a beautiful thing, really.
I think it came up, we talked about it a few times. It came up in our Bobby T episode, but I learned a lot just from the Kabbalah. And like, there was
Yeah.
like one phrase in this old book called the Bahir that like
Hmm.
clarified a ton of Buddhist shit for me, like in
Hmm.
one little paragraph. I was like,
Hmm.
holy shit. But
Hmm.
then, like, there's other things. I think this is like a certain period in my life, because around that same time I started really reading Lama Yeshe again, and I was like, shit, this is all coming together for me. There's this Tibetan guy talking. There's some Kabbalist who's been dead for however many millennia,
Hmm.
and it's like piecing together.
Hmm.
The universe is reconstructing for me. Yeah, my little universe or something like that. It's just I don't know. It's such a joyful experience.
Sure.
You and I talk about the joy of just learning. Like when
Yeah.
you learn in this area, you just feel so happy. It's one that I don't know. It's epiphanous and happy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything better than a good epiphany? I don't know. I think it's one of the most happy moments you're gonna have.
Epiphanies are great. I mean, they're orgasmic. They say that, like, what do they say? There's 8 moments that you touch, like, an enlightened state throughout the day, or like have like an orgasmic, or I don't know what they call it.
We were
Like,
talking about that last episode too. There's these
yeah,
special
like at the
moments.
at the tip of a yawn,
Yeah.
at the peak of an orgasm, upon waking, upon
And the
sleeping,
sneeze.
at the tip of a sneeze.
Yeah.
These are all times, but they never mention an epiphanous moment.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
it was funny because, oh yeah, go ahead. Let me cut you
yeah,
off. Go
but
ahead.
for me, an epiphanous moment is a relief. It's a release. It's like these two little wires are like so close. They're like back and forth. You're watching a movie, the hero's trying to grab on the heroine or whatever, and then finally it clicks, and then just the whole thing lights up.
Yeah.
Really, it's
that
something.
that thing is like sexual, and it's very
There we go. Yeah,
imagery.
yeah. Oh yeah, I got it. I got
What was our phrase? Shengasm.
Shengasm. That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so true. And like you were kind of talking, in these different states where people feel close to the core of who they are. That was like
Mm-hmm.
how we started like talk about that last time, and it sort of like flowed. The conversation flowed that way. And you were talking about some of the women that you knew, tantric meditators, and they were saying like, well, sex is okay, but this meditation thing,
Right.
that's a rock star.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. Like if you really look at yourself, maybe your epiphanous moment is just as happy as your best orgasm or something. Probably true. Mm-hmm.
I can say for
They're
sure
competing.
that an
Those two
epiphanous,
things combined together, the epiphany during the boom,
yeah,
best of both worlds.
that's the best of
Yeah.
both worlds. But
Yeah.
the funny thing about like epiphanies is that they last longer than an orgasm, right? So
Yeah.
that's one, and they have I'm going to argue they have a more profound effect. Like it's a kind of a deeper, I don't know, drop into the water, and that it creates more ripples throughout your life, if you
It's
allow it.
interesting because we still have it's so ironic given the title of this show, but we still have like all of this tantric sexuality things to talk about, and
Right.
Taoist ones too, and all that. Give meditations for people to try, and some of those things are like they're sexual, but they're super epiphanous too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where you try to like weave those two things together. Mm-hmm. Tantra means to weave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're trying to weave these things together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that does get to where we were at, because we were talking about this idea of like different moments when this Buddha nature sort of like pops on the scene.
Yeah.
Some of them are again like really kind of weird, like a sneeze, a yawn. It just has to do with how the energies in the body move for that little window of time or something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a brief glimmer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of funny stuff to talk about up the road too. And then sexuality, obviously a more powerful and enjoyable thing than the sneeze. And so anyways, we'll talk about that stuff as we go.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, so kind of where we were at. So the whole idea then is, then if you like again listen to the Dalai Lama, you want to learn some of this stuff, is that all these, what happens in those experiences is again these more superficial parts fall away, sometimes for a brief moment, And so like it's well, obviously it's not like your body disappears during a sneeze.
Right.
It's just the idea that for a few moments the flow of the energies within the body create this little glimmer of this deeper part of yourself shining through.
Yeah.
And so when your awareness pulls away from all these more superficial parts, then boom, this clear light can appear. And then, the Dalai Lama's point would be, and he's like reflecting Buddhist Tantra, is that you can kind of meditate on that experience. So maybe not all the gory details now, because I think we got to do something on, the disillusions, maybe is more of a thing later on.
Yeah.
So there's a way of even trying to visualize what this is like. Maybe we'll save that for a little bit up the road, but you kind of visualize all these parts kind of like dropping away till you hit this deep part of who you are. That's, one of the big ideas of how to meditate on this.
So,
Yeah.
So speaking of epiphanous moments, I'm having sort of one at the moment, and we're kind of talking in generalities about like meditating yourself towards enlightenment and having enlightenment be and meditation be the practice for it.
Yeah. And I think you have to understand that that's what you're being asked to do. Otherwise, that's kind of like,
yes.
For me, that was something like, oh, the Dalai Lama is telling me that what I'm really doing is I'm meditating on the enlightened form. Oh shit, no one ever said that to me. That's like an epiphanous moment for me.
And so I think that like from people who don't have a practice like this, it's hard to sort of take this abstract idea, sensation, feel it, whatever, and move it into right. And me being Capricorn person, goat person, right? I have this idea. And I think that the best way that I could probably put it, it's as if when a person is watching a movie or listening to a story, that there are some moments when you are so engrossed in the story, it's as if you're part of it. Mm-hmm. Right? You can see it, you can feel it, it brings up emotions, it does things. And to your point, you forget that you're you. You forget like you have your own
suspension of disbelief, they call it, or something like that.
Yeah, but
much.
Mm-hmm. That's the point, mm-hmm. Right? Is that you have to suspend the disbelief that like there is something that lasts beyond this finite, not life, and that there is a state that one could reach that, I don't know, extends beyond time or space.
Yeah.
And so the more that you practice that, you suspend the disbeliefs. I like to say I always, but I regularly think I'm one realization away. You know what I'm saying? And I always step into that. I'm like, I'm so close. Oh, I'm so close. Even during the day, I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so far away. But like, really, when I sit down and I practice, I'm like, no, I'm really close, actually. Despite what my brain says.
That advice is good advice though anyways. It's an optimistic point of view of things. Sometimes I say like this whole Buddha nature thing is to like make people feel optimistic, otherwise you could walk around feeling I'm such a like a dope and a goof and a clown, and what I do. But it's supposed to make you be like, no, you got a Buddha nature, you're right there,
right? You're so close.
It's so close. I think Milarepa says something about that. You got to be optimistic about it, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, all your internal doubts will fuck your head up.
Yeah.
Right. We're all full of like weird, kind of funny thoughts in our head, which I think do get better as you do more of this stuff. A lot of those funny thoughts start to like dissolve themselves too, because they're part of like some bullshit ego thing, anyways. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the idea of this, and then you'll hit this clear light experience. I guess the reason why we're talking like parts that were important for each of us. This was important for me to hear because I had done a lot of Zen and I had done a lot of Taoist stuff, and I felt like I had approximation experiences of this Buddha nature experience, but I didn't have a clear sense of like what the heck it meant or something. Like I could get into some special places and I'd be like, oh, this is really cool and it feels awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't think I saw the context that the Dalai Lama put out for this. That, oh no, this is what this means in this context. And it gave me a feeling of like what the overall picture was supposed to be. Where otherwise, maybe you have experiences that are cool, but you have a hard time slotting them into a big picture.
Right.
So I think that's because the part that's important for me to kind of share in some of these things is like, okay, I got a big picture feeling out of studying what these Tibetan folks were talking about that maybe I didn't quite have before.
Sure.
They gave a big picture feeling. that complemented the individual like moments of experience, you know,
Right.
when those two come together. All right. So then they talk about this idea that you're not going to necessarily always like hit touchdown every single time, right? You know, it isn't always going to be like you go to some like deepest possible experience of this core of who you are, but you'll kind of like approximate to it. So this idea that you're getting approximations, and the approximations will kind of get more and more close to the experience the farther you go. That's kind of, I think, motivating too.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can feel like, okay, you know, I'm working towards a more clear sense, vision, experience of this core part of who I am, and I'm approximating it out. So I think that's kind of inspiring, and eventually you will expire, and you'll feel this thing just on the totals. Yeah. So sometimes they'll use this idea of like example clear light mind experiences. Again, if you try to read the Dalai Lama, there's all this, it sounds a little jargony, but that's basically the gist of it. You're getting like more and more close to this, right? Um okay, so and you make the point of consciously meditating on this experience, and you get closer and closer to this experience of who you are. And then in terms of what we're going to talk about in the Dalai Lama school, 4 aspects of the enlightened form or person, or something like the enlightened state, is that they call this like the nature body, which we haven't really dropped this term in any of these
No.
previous episodes. So it's just a way of talking about this experience of the core of who you are as a person by nature, you know. And then we'll add in the other pieces to this thing. But this idea of this nature body, when all this other stuff starts to fall away, then you hit this nature body experience. And it's just another word for like the experience of Buddha nature, the experience of the core of who you are, your soul or Shen or spirit or whatever word you want to put in there that works for you. So in some ways it's interesting because on the one hand, it's kind of naturally just kind of hanging out by itself, just the way it is, right? It's there in every single person. And it's naturally sort of just, you could use the word pure probably if that word works for you, but if that word doesn't work for you, whatever word you like, you know. And then in that sense, it's kind of discovered. So this is sort of maybe the part in the way we presented in the Dalai Lama school of Buddhist Tantra, like how this would be described, this moment of discovering this part of yourself that's always kind of existed. It's been there like the whole time. And as you kind of let the other things kind of fall away, you can have these experiences of this thing. And I guess when it gets to the really deepest version of this, it'll like just shine on crazy diamond. It'll just be its thing that you'll probably be aware of all the time. But even if that's not happening now, that's what you're working on.
Right.
You know, you're working towards that experience, which you could actually do during your day. I mean, you could walk around saying, oh yeah, I have this clear light mind. And you try to feel like you have a little feeling of it. You know, I think the Dalai Lama recommends things like that. And every experience, it's kind of like hanging around. Yeah. Behind the scenes, covertly there. Yeah. That's this idea. All right, so that's this nature body thing. And I think yeah, in prepping like my part of this, I went back and I kind of looked like, what did the Dalai Lama say? There's one little book where he specifically goes over this. It's I think he read it when he was really young. It's an interesting thing. He just kind of very methodically just lays this stuff out. So anyways, this is what I'm referencing in this, right? But it comes across in all these Buddhist teachings. Gelek Rinpoche would talk about this idea of course he did, but this idea of, you know, this kind of Buddha nature, though he didn't always use that word, but this Buddha nature, clear light mind that's kind of just naturally there. You know, it's the nature body. You got anything you want to add about that one?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, other than
it speaks for itself.
Yeah, I mean, other than I think you can hear something numerous times, and like we've talked about this before, but sometimes it clicks. So I think, you know, I've listened to tons of different people, teachers, you know, teachers in a group setting, whether they're actual teachers or not, who knows? But if I'm learning something from you, then you're my teacher in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
That they talk about this like natural state of being. Now, I don't know that they're referencing that particular state, or if they're referencing more like a natural state of like a joyful, pleasant human experience, you know, and
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of like a jovial, childlike manner of experiencing the world, you know. But I think there's, for me in my mind, there's a differentiation between something that is not bound to physical experience, that is like the natural state, like of a being, period, not an embodied being, but just a being in and of itself, versus like a pleasant, jovial, satisfied, happy state of existence while being human at the same time.
This
You
is
know?
really interesting because I was talking to some students about this, and we have, one particular person who's going through these Taoist, Buddhist protocol, acupuncture, Chinese medical stuff. And I had that, like, I felt like I had to have that conversation because there's two different things you can be working on, and they're both good.
Mm,
One could be the thing of like, okay, let me find my own core Buddha nature. That's a big statement. That's this thing, the formless, pure aspect of my own spirit or something like that.
mm-hmm,
The other is like kind of like finding a comfortable way of being yourself in the world,
mm-hmm,
right? I'm going to
mm-hmm,
be natural in the world. I'm going to function in the world in a natural and flowing way, you know? And those are, I think, in like something like Zen or Taoism, complementary ideas,
right.
in the sense that you can find the deepest part of who you are, and you'll probably also flow more in your everyday world. Those two things kind of feed into each other, but they're not quite the same thing.
Right.
And I have had conversations with people where you sort of, like, from my side at least, I have to realize, okay, we're not quite talking about the same thing. It's cool,
Right.
and everything that everyone's talking about is important,
Yeah.
you know but like these are just kind of two different sets of experiences, and it's like kind of two different projects in your life
Mm-hmm,
that are both really important and valuable. And I was kind of
mm-hmm,
just trying to frame this for these students recently, just trying to like, okay, at least this is how I'm thinking about it, so we know we're on the same page with this. And I want both of these things for this patient, for sure. Those are
mm-hmm,
both important things to realize. Who am I
mm-hmm,
authentically in the world? Me. Me as Eric, or you as Daniel, or that person as that person. Who am I? Right. So I can be an authentic version of who I am. I got
yeah.
like a Taoist friend, TCM person, to have on this podcast at some point. I'm not going to like mention the person yet until they agree to come on. They will. They've already agreed. We just haven't had the chance to do the episode yet. We got guests in the queue lining up.
Mm-hmm,
But he likes to, he talks about wanting to be authentic. And I think that's what he's meaning in that. He wants to be naturally authentic, an expression of himself in his life in the world. But he's not talking about his Buddha nature at that moment
mm-hmm,
exactly. It's that's what kind of like fits into what you're talking about, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, without a doubt. I
yeah.
think an example, I don't know if it fits here perfectly, but an example they use in like the yogic tradition is the idea of like the koshas, or the shells, you know,
Mm-hmm.
around somebody, and that like the light of being is like a light bulb, and that there's
Yeah,
these different like lamp shades wrapped around them, you know, physical body, energetic body, so on and so forth, you know. And that like the lamp shades are sort of like our own mosaic of personality, you know. And so having them more in alignment can emit the light in your own more natural way,
yeah,
because some people it doesn't really emit at all, and it's very hard to kind of connect to people's light. And we talk about the shining in someone's eyes, or how they present themselves in the world, you know, that they're not so closed off. But that is in reference to like the being in the world. And I think what this I'm referencing is the light itself, the light bulb, or the light that's coming from the filaments in this analogy on
yeah,
its
yeah, yeah,
own,
yeah, yeah.
independent, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Um, so, or the current that's plugged in, you know what I'm saying? Like you get, yeah, that's, yeah,
I
but
just keep thinking,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is, again, we're talking from different places, and they're all kind of like similar, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think like the thing in Zen, and I can remember talking about this back in the day with people, and it's a funny point, but like they would say, well, yeah, the more you tap into this nature body of who you are,
Yeah.
the more it's going to kind of impact your life. And then you're going to feel like when you're doing your activities that they're going to flow,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. You were talking about like being in the state of watching a movie or something like that when you get super
Yeah.
absorbed. That's like a flow state, right?
Yeah.
I'm flowing along with this story. You're
Yeah.
watching everything everywhere all at once, you, Daniel, because you love that movie so much. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm flowing along with this fucker. I am in every little scene, I'm
Yeah.
following it. You're completely absorbed, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a flow thing. So they kind of make this, one of their spiritual ideas is the more you can spend finding this nature body thing, the more it'll start to like give you this experience in your life of feeling this flow and authenticity. Sometimes in Zen they'll talk about like the spontaneity that happens, right? Once you feel this thing, you feel kind of like spontaneously who you are. It's almost hard not to on some weird level.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
like it's hard not to be yourself because it feels fake.
yeah, I was gonna say at some point you probably want to connect those two, right? Like the natural state of existence, the natural state of being, it emanates as your natural state of existence.
I guess you could kind of like figure out what all the gory details of that would mean, but they definitely in this Zen and Taoist thing says, like, let's say you decide, okay, you listen to this episode or you already decided this for yourself or whatever. I'm going to meditate on this natural state of who I am.
Yeah.
And try to experience this thing. Then there, like the Zen kind of Taoist-y vibe would be something like, okay, now when I go out in my life, I'm going to be much more smooth and fluid and effective in a way. You don't want to make the whole meditation thing about effective, because that's what's happening in our culture all the time.
Yeah.
You know, you'll be like 12% more happy and 15% more effective or something.
Your bowel movements will flow 12% more efficiently.
We've done some studies. We show this.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, increase in urinary output of 14%. Like, okay, awesome.
VO2 max is going up. Tidal volume increased.
Yeah, like it's like exactly what our culture would do with this stuff.
Yeah, but I
so
will
say
like,
but it is more. It's supposed to be more fluid, and there's all kinds of stories about I know in Taoism they have the idea of the person who's like a butcher and like they're in this flow state, so they can kind of like they never have to sharpen their tools again because they're so like fluid and everything. They never hit a bone or like hit the gristle wrong. I'm not a butcher, I don't know. But anyway,
that's the story.
Everything works really great for them when they're butchering.
Yeah.
Or whatever else you're up to.
But right. Yeah, you don't have to be a butcher to be in a flow state.
So I think the whole you definitely don't.
Only reserved for butchers.
It's really funny because this the first Zen school I was studying, it was very samurai, and it was part of the idea like even when you're in the state of like going into some sword combat or something, you can get into this flow state and you'll probably be better at like stabbing the other people or whatever.
But the same goes
no matter what the state is, it gets more flowy.
Yeah, the same goes for artwork. I mean, you're channeling, you're channeling something that's more than just your finite, limited sense of self, right? That's the point, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then this other part of who you are taps in. And those two things kind of fuse, and all of a sudden you're able to be more spontaneously expressive in your art or something. Maybe in a way that you wouldn't before. And maybe that just has something to do with like the more obstructive parts of who you are aren't there.
Sure.
So your speech gets more spontaneous and authentic or something, something like that. If you're teaching like we do, or your art or your music just like flows.
Right. Well, you're increasing the volume of your inspiration.
Yeah, I think that's right. The source of it somehow, right? That's your beaming through the different colors or something, right? The beam gets turned up really big and all the colors start to shine.
This is good. I have fantastic imagery right now. I hope the audience is with me, because I'm on
it's all visual. We're butchering. There's light shining everywhere. If we need to, we can grab a sword and just all of a sudden go all ninja. And then later on we could pick up a lute.
That's right.
And lightly make a spontaneous verse. And then make love deep into the wee hours of the night.
That just sounds like a great day.
And if we happen to sneeze, boom. Even then.
Yeah, that's right.
And our bowel movements will be 12% more effective.
And we'll remember where we left the keys to our car in an epiphanous moment. It's like,
that's right.
In my shoe.
It's funny because, even in those moments, like we both play music, and I can remember the joy of when people playing music, when it really clicks. I mean, that's a special joy too. But they would say, oh, that's that flow. Yeah. And in that moment, you're feeling that thing. You're kind of in a subtle way also making that door open to this deeper experience of maybe your nature body. Though, you're not always like seeing boom, pure blissful light shining everywhere.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the nature body thing. And I guess that was something I was thinking about too, Daniel. Like, okay, if I'm not going to like hit the jackpot of massive enlightenment, every single day, but what's the value of doing this? And this is the value of doing this. Yeah. Right. It's a training that helps you like be more effective in your life too, but not in the like, I'll get like a more optimizing my promotion necessarily, not in a neoliberal American sense. That probably helps that too, to be honest.
Yeah,
Okay.
you could say
Yeah.
effective, or maybe I would say effortless.
Spontaneous, flowing, effortless. That all sounds good.
Yeah, because when you're, when you are in this, I mean, it's also, it comes in sports, it comes in art, it comes in
Yeah.
artwork. It's better when when you do it without thinking.
Or the thoughts flow very
The thoughts flow
smoothly.
very smoothly. Yeah,
The neurotic thoughts of your mind don't like clunk it up.
yeah,
You know what I mean? The
yeah,
smooth thoughts of your mind flow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you can react in a natural way that is not, you know,
It's
you,
interesting because sometimes when I talk with students about it, I use like the Michael Jordan example from like back in the day
yeah,
because he could just flow. And they actually, like the guy who wrote the book called Flow, actually talk with him about that.
mm,
This idea that you get into this weird state where you're like, you sort of can even anticipate what's going to happen and everything
mm.
goes very effortlessly for you.
I could say for sure that when I've been part of various ceremonies, plant medicine or breath work, whatever. I think we use cacao, so there's still some plant medicine there. At some point, things come supernatural that I don't even think about it. And as they're coming, I'm like, oh wow, that's sort of amazing. And someone will say usually, well, how'd you know to do that? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I couldn't tell you where it just came. It came as a thought that was, I guess it's my own now, but it definitely was not how I think traditionally.
Yeah. And you love, like, you personally, Daniel, love that experience of like
I love it.
spontaneous
Love it.
inspiration.
Yeah.
It's one of your favorite things.
It's amazing.
Yeah. When we do these episodes, if you could crumple up all of my notes and just light them on fire and just let everything just spontaneously flow, you would love that.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm fucking around. I'm just joking.
maybe only half. Keep the beginning and end, and then we'll fucking do the rest.
Yeah, we both have to have our roles on this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, we both like it. I love
Yeah.
those moments of like just like spontaneously being who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then weird shit will happen. You'll say shit where like someone's like, why did you say that to me? Because I was exactly just thinking about that thing. Sometimes you'll almost be reading people's minds and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A funny experience yesterday, I was like doing a student clinic, and I was like, I wonder if this one student's ever listened to any West African music. So I walked out. I don't know why. It's funny. You don't even know why you think it.
Right.
So I walked out and said, have you ever listened to West African music? And she went, I just started taking West African dance. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
what's funny is I have a friend over right now, and she just started taking West African dance.
So this, I think we're going to talk about Jung a little bit up the road, but this is the synchronicity thing.
Yeah.
That's his idea. When you get to this nature body state,
Mm.
everything will flow better. And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden those synchronistic moments will just sort of spontaneously happen because they are spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole gig of it.
Mm.
Yeah. All right, cool. So you ready to do wisdom body?
Let's do it.
Okay. So this wisdom, or sometimes people say truth body, dharma. This is the dharma body. And that word dharma means like a million things. We talked about that in the last few episodes building up. People can translate that all kinds of ways because it means all kinds of stuff. Wisdom, truth, reality, I know, teaching. It can mean all kinds of stuff. But in any case, so this is the experience of, so here's what the Dalai Lama says. Here's this for a quote. I decided I better just say this verbatim.
Yeah.
So he says, this is the experienced state of directly perceiving all modes and varieties of objects of knowledge as if they were directly in front of oneself. So there's a certain quality of a clarity with this, right? Where you can kind of like see everything with this maximum clarity. And it even does, like, I think what you were talking about earlier, seem to defy ideas of even time and space in some ways. If you get to the deepest idea of this, because everything's going to appear to you, in this very natural way again of just, having insight.
I'm telling you, man, that movie should be called Dharma, right? You could see and
Everything everywhere all
experience
at once.
everything everywhere all at once. I mean, it's
Yeah. I mean, I think there probably some person who has some Eastern philosophical vibe within that, right?
Oh, for sure.
So this thing includes this idea of kind of transcending space a little bit, maybe kind of transcending time a little bit, if you get to the deepest part of this. But you can kind of get to the other part of this, which is a little bit what we were talking about earlier. On a more minor level, you could be just like more clear in seeing things. Your perception clarifies. But on the deepest idea, and I think Lama Glenn Glenn H. Mullen, like one of our beloved teachers and one of my dear Dharma friends and yours too, likes to talk about this idea of interconnectivity. People don't always say that, but in this moment, you have this idea of like, okay, I'm a little, there's a part of me that transcends space, probably transcends time, right? And then there's a part of me that kind of recognizes the infinite degrees of interconnectivity between all things, something like that.
And that's how he would say it too.
Yeah, almost with those
All
exact
things.
intonations.
Yeah.
That's my Lama Glenn impression. So no one, you have to watch the episode to even know how he talks. We got an episode with him if you want to watch it. But the interconnectivity of all things. So there's this thing called Indra's net, which is one of the big images for this, right? So Indra is one of the Indian deities. If you haven't heard of Indra ever in your travels, but it's this image of like he has this huge net that expands throughout everything, and it's all these little beads, and each little point is a bead that will reflect every other bead in this whole infinite net. So it's like all these beads reflecting with one another, right? And so like if you get to the Indra's net thing, you can kind of like be your own little bead, but like see all the other beads reflecting, because everything has this interconnectivity idea, right? Sometimes I think in the Dzogchen thing, which we talked about before, they'll talk about like a crystal, and the light shines in the crystal, and that's your Buddha nature coming through, and it'll shine out of the crystal, stuff like that. But then they'll also say that this crystal will reflect everything else going on around it. So this is kind of this wisdom truth body idea, right? Everything will be kind of interconnected in this way, and you'll see this whole thing. I like that Lama Glenn uses that word, because sometimes they don't use it. He uses this word interconnectivity or something like that when he talks about wisdom in Buddhism. So he doesn't always use like just emptiness or something. He almost purposely doesn't do that. If you read between the lines, he's making the point of like, yeah, you can say everything is lacks inherent existence, that shunyata thing, which we've done episodes on here and there, but he really likes to emphasize the idea of interconnectivity. So that always jumps out to me. When someone says something in their own unique way, it hits you. You're like, oh, he's making a point here. He's not just saying the thing that people usually say. He's saying something a little different, because he's trying to point out a different side of this or something, that everything is interconnected.
And I think maybe I want to just add something onto Indra's net, because because of the language of today. Like I think a net sounds confining, as if everything is wrapped up. But I think if we just add network, just work at the end, so Indra's network, then it seems like things are connected, which then is how it is. Because this, and I could say this because this is how I experience it, is that like it's as I make my way through the various layers and I reach that point, it's like everywhere I look, all the things are sort of like attached, not in a negative way attached, but connected. All of
everywhere, all at once.
All of it. It's all connected. And no matter where I look or where it doesn't matter. It's just all there, all connected.
I like the network thing. It's good.
Yeah.
That works for me. It does, like, that's like one of your goals in this. You always want to come up with like, what's the way that people would say this right now?
Yeah.
Right. Tapping into the vibe of the day. Right. I mean, you could say like it's a matrix, but that has that Keanu like dark connotation now, and like, so that word I was like, sounds a little ominous or something, right?
Yeah, it sounds like structured or rigid or something.
I mean, I don't think it sounded that way until that movie came out.
Probably not,
but and then it has that feeling to it, what I mean?
Then like people, the AI,
it feels confining, right? Feels confining.
Yeah, and like the game theory that we're living in a simulation. You know what I'm saying? It
has that weird, connotation. But yeah, network. Yeah. So, it's funny about when we did the Lama Glenn episode, I didn't realize he had all that physics and engineering thing in his undergrad days back in the day. I actually didn't know that, even though I knew him for like years, decade and a half or something, before we did that episode. But that came up then, and I was like, oh, because really, it's a deep statement about the nature of nature. And we like to do some physics. We have some physics episodes back in the day. And like, it's kind of like entanglement.
Yes.
Everything is entangled, right? Not that you see it like through your day-to-day eyes. They're not designed to pick up on that.
No.
They're designed to pick up on like squirrel, skunk, tree, whatever. They're doing something else, attractive object of my desire.
That's right. Ooh. Wishing toys.
Yeah. fearful object that I should flee from. I mean,
Oh,
they're
yeah,
designed to do a different thing.
Yeah.
You know. But and you know, when we had Lama Glenn on, he kind of referenced the Einstein quote that I think we both kind of love. There's an optical delusion to all of this, right?
Yeah.
You know, Einstein says it. You think you're not connected with that mountain over there, but that's just a delusion of your senses.
Mm-hmm.
You are. You just think that you're not. Yeah. So yeah, that's a whole idea. Like in the if that works for you too, I think that was compelling for me.
Yeah.
You know, because I kind of came from a physics place. I there's obviously a lot of truth in physics, and then when you saw that the truth in physics overlap with the truth in this part of the world, you're like, oh, this is very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Epiphany. Shengasm. Whatever. But you know, it's kind of one of those feelings. Like that was very satisfying. So if the physics thing speaks to you, you know, then you're like in that headspace already, right?
And again, it's using, something that you're familiar with, something that speaks to you literally, to make these larger connections, because we're relative creatures. Everything is relative,
Dude had the theory called relativity.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Nature's relative. But in Buddhism, that's called the dependent origination or interconnectivity, right? It's part of dependent origination. Everything is entwined together in this way. So everything's affecting each other, even though we don't see it with our senses in that way, right? I think it's like the Rumi thing too, because we were talking about love in last episode. And you know, like even when your beloved is away, even when Rumi and Shams are together, they're still connected because they're entangled. No matter where in the vast everything everywhere all at once cosmos Rumi Shams may be at the present time, you know, you're still interconnected with the beloved, right? Yeah, which is comforting if you happen to be separated from the beloved.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I teach in a class on this thing this semester on all this physics. It's one of my responsibilities in my teaching thing to teach physics for traditional Chinese medical students. Kind of a funny gig, but it's enjoyable for me. And so I was just, yeah, it was on my mind. So I was talking to my son in the cafe during the week. We go and he plays chess. There's this little chess thing back over there. And we go play chess. He goes to play chess. I can't play chess worth shit. So no, I can't. But he's very good. So he goes and plays in the cafe. And but then we were chatting and I was like talking about this interconnectivity thing. And it was interesting to see his reaction because part of it was like, what? You could see a part of him's like, what? And he's like, I don't understand how that could be on some level, you know, but he's also intrigued. So it's that interesting reaction. Maybe a lot of us can feel that feeling like him, this feeling of like, okay, I don't see it that way, but the idea is intriguing. Right. And then I think in a Buddhist meditative thing, you would say, well, that's how you start to overcome the optical delusion. Right.
I think perhaps
the idea starts to speak to you and you're like, you start to see, you know,
you might be able to
the
use
possibility of it.
Does he play with Legos? Or did he used to?
Nah, I mean, he used to, he never was that into them.
Okay.
He would build something cool if there was something to build, but
sure.
I mean, I think probably I don't play chess, so I don't know anything about it. But I mean, imagine even on the chessboard, you feel the interconnectivity of things.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, like, if you have a thing made up of Legos, like, yeah, now it's a Star Wars ship, but it's made of Legos, and all the people inside are made of Legos, and all those Legos are made of the same plastic. You know what I'm saying? So, like, in a more confined space, it sort of.
That always speaks to me, the idea that everything is actually sort of like Tao or the divine all around you or something like that, right?
Yeah. Or plastic.
All the Legos. It's just some artificial plastic, and then
right, which is everywhere. Which
we're all
is
doomed to end up in a giant landfill, and all the fish will choke, and
which is everywhere. All right, I saw something the other day, and the guy took a microscope to like a piece of like sliced American cheese wrapped in plastic, and there's plastic particles all over this piece of cheese, like all over the cheese. So I don't know, random, but you know,
it's kind of weird because I mean, I think they're talking about like sperm counts falling in men. Yeah. And like whether or not there's just this toxicity that's happening that's building up. That's the downside of interconnectivity, I guess, right? There's your downside. You lose your sperm.
That's right.
We're all connected. Falls. That's the downside of it. And then like Roop. Oh well. Ups and downs of interconnectivity. Maybe that's part of the environmental thing too, right? We have to recognize this. It's hard to see it. Yeah. All right, so the thing is, like, it's cool that you said what you said earlier, because then, like, you have to meditate on this thing. You know, you're supposed to meditate on this feeling of like, okay, I'm interconnected with all this other stuff. And that's how, as the Dalai Lama says, I'm able to directly perceive all modes and varieties of objects of knowledge as if they were directly in front of me. Because in a certain sense, they are, you know, even though it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this it's interesting then, because this depends on this idea of having this realization, right? That your mind and energy have this interconnectivity quality with everything. And then how do you visualize that or something? And you were talking about your own experience of it. Yeah. So that's a visualization of something like that. Yeah. Amazing. Kind of amazing. All right. So I think we're doing a decent job explaining these things.
I think so.
As much as they can be explained. Okay. Next on the, unless you have more, do you want to say anything
Nope.
more about this one, or are you good? Okay. Everything everywhere all at once. So next is the complete enjoyment body, or sometimes enjoyment is how the Dalai Lama will tend to talk about this. I can't remember what we use for this. Was it reward? Maybe sometimes people do it like that.
Yeah,
we've kind of referenced different parts of the Buddhist world with this.
I
So
just
anyways,
don't.
it's
I just
enjoyment, reward. It's like different words that people will use.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like either of those. I don't like reward. Because it has a punishment content, you know. Well, if you didn't get it, you're not being rewarded, you know.
It's not Christian. So you know what I mean? But it might be true when these words go into different cultures, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that doesn't sound good in our culture.
Yeah, right? And I don't know the word well enough, and I haven't heard, you know, Bobby T or Lama Glenn kind of just go through. They move past it into the description first, you know. They don't really
some Bogakaya, and what Bobby T points out that is it's related to the word for like orgasm.
Okay.
It has a similar root, I guess, in Sanskrit or something. I'm pretty sure that's how he's talked about it.
Pleasureful.
I don't know the Sanskrit. I mean, it could be bliss. I suppose you could call it a bliss body. But you know, like it's supposed to have the connotation of like enjoyment and pleasure and all that. Because you're referencing this word that has to do with like orgasmic at its root or something. Does that work for you though? All right, you have to come up with a Danielism for this.
Yeah.
Because actually, even saying enjoyment doesn't really kind of capture what it is.
No,
Okay.
Because like the orgasm is, you have like the yin and the yang side, right? You have the build up before you hit before this, you know, you're building up one side of the bridge, and then you have the outward, sort of like explosion, you know, of the release, but the release is equivalent to the buildup.
There's a certain like charge, right?
Yeah,
charge builds up and releases. You know, we haven't done an episode on Wilhelm Reich, which I think we're going to do at some point, because he makes that point too. If you can't build up a lot of charge, it's hard to have a lot of release, and it kind of like kills the intensity of the experience, right? Yeah, it's the other funny part about the orgasm thing specifically is that's kind of a little bit more like Dharmakaya. You know, it's formless.
Yeah,
but this isn't really formless. This is something else. Yeah, but you know, it's funny in the way that you're just like the way this episode is flowing with this imagery of this connection, like that you kind of start off with like two neurons connecting. Is that like, it's so funny that nature repeats in this same way, because it's a charge and a buildup and a you know, and then stuff flows. It's so weird that nature's just like that all the time. It's like the same stuff, whether you're talking about like big scale or small scale. I guess in a certain sense it's all connected to neurology in our little metaphor, but you know, like nature's like that. It like wants to connect it, and it wants to go bang, and it, you know, it wants to be blissful.
As they say, Eric, as above, so below. I mean, the Big Bang is essentially the universe's first orgasm.
I can remember when that first hit me. I was doing these Taoist meditations, and I was getting closer and closer to this feeling of like, okay, yin and yang meet, and then bang, and I was like, holy shit, that's the Big Bang, you know? Like it hit me, you know, like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah.
It's the first big orgasm of the universe, right? And then you're on your way to like Taoist sexology and Buddhist tantra and or any tantra really, right? Yeah. Or like, okay, anyways, we'll get to it. We got lots of episodes to talk about this shit, but yeah. All Okay, so what is this thing then? This thing of which we speak, Sambhogakaya, enjoyment, reward, or pleasure, or bliss, or I don't know, whatever word we're going to come up with for it. I think you get enjoyment a lot. Anyways, you think it's too weak sounding enjoyment? It just
Yeah.
doesn't sound strong enough. I get that. Mhm. All right. So as far as meditations go, this is the meditation of appearing in sort of like a subtle enlightened form. That's the idea of this, which is a huge deal in like Buddhist tantric meditation. Again, I don't know as much about Hindu tantra with this, how exactly this issue is handled.
Appearing to
But
whom?
well, okay, so let's talk about what it looks like, and then we'll talk about like to whom. But if you're meditating, the idea is you're supposed to like meditate in your if we're doing a visualization, everything everywhere all at once. So what is it? Nature body, pure bliss, emptiness, dharmakaya, pure bliss, emptiness, interconnected with everything all at once. They're kind of formless. This becomes kind of more form, and then you meditate on the idea of appearing as some enlightened Buddhist archetypal figure. So in the Dalai Lama school, this is a big deal to do this, and some of this is tied to like particular practices and empowerments and things like that, where they'll have different ways of how you're supposed to visualize this. If you get into these things, you'll probably do this every day. You'll visualize this process of like appearing as this enlightened person. But again, it's hard to talk about all the details of this because they're kind of like empowerment things.
And
So
we
it's kind of
do.
like the Dalai Lama, the DL, the down low. This is the QT part of this. You're not supposed to like go and talk about all the gory details of any individual practice, but that's the idea of this.
But
So yeah,
we do have episodes on empowerment, 2 episodes actually,
yeah.
that came out in August of 22. So
Those were inspired kind of like by the Dalai Lama doing one of these empowerments, right?
yeah, exactly. So we do break this down. And then following that, a few weeks, maybe about a month or so later, we did another episode called Emanations of Enlightenment, where we sort of dropped the seeds to this part of the conversation right here, actually. So it's sort of a refleshing of some of those in a way. So when Eric is asking me for like, what about a Danielism for this, it's because we've been over this and trying to come up with language that fits with today's vibe, today's mind.
Well, that really matters to you a lot, right? That you
Yeah.
care about that a lot because you're like, well, how do you speak about this? And I've been, as you've been in this episode, I realized that that's one of the big goals for you. How do I speak about this in a way that will resonate with folks now, given the kind of way we're using language now? We could like try to translate some old Sanskrit thing, but that might not capture it for people, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's one of these things where like for me, like in like thinking about this in this particular episode, it was like supposed to be this idea like, if you go through all the process of exactly how they do the specific visualization and like the Guhya Samaja Tantra or something, that's like not considered to be like a kosher thing to do because you're supposed to actually know that practice and get introduced to it before you start like doing that. So it is tied to like each individual little tantric practice you might do might give the details of like how you're supposed to specifically visualize this a little bit different. But the basic idea in the end is that you kind of appear as some kind of Buddhist figure if we're doing it this way, right? So you might appear as like a subtle Tara, if you like Tara, one of the Buddhist goddesses. So you appear as this like subtle Tara, let's say, and then there's this idea that like you're supposed to imagine yourself having these various qualities, because in some ways what the Dalai Lama is saying is that this is an exercise of imagination at this point. It's a meditative thing you're doing, right? You're visualizing this process where you appear as Tara, but this subtle energetic Tara. And the idea is that you're supposed to like then sort of have your own kind of Tara energetic body that's radiating out everywhere, all beautiful and funky and great. And then you're supposed to like live in this transformed sense of the world around you that is now this tantric world. And then you're like projecting all of these compassionate teachings out everywhere. And this keeps going on without interruption until everyone gets it. And you're doing it all the time, right? And it's a visualization, that you're doing this. So you come from this huge, formless, interconnected place to this bang, I'm radiating out everywhere, like this complete rock star and like enlightened form going everywhere. And it's a visualization, right? Yeah.
And you can, I think, they use the word hero or heroine, not the drug, but, heroine,
Yeah.
female hero.
Yeah.
But they use this word hero or heroine, and seeing yourself as a Tara figure or as an enlightened figure, whoever, whatever calls to you, if it's whatever, Jesus or some, whatever you see yourself as, we're not gonna argue that part, at the moment, but you see yourself as a something that's coming from everything, right? So you're not coming from nothing, you're coming from everything as this being, and then you have sort of these like magical kind of like enlightening abilities.
Yeah, that's the idea. Now, they think they say, technically speaking, this will only be seeable to people who can see more subtle things or something like that. But you're still doing your mojo.
You're still doing your thing.
Yeah.
It's, I guess, maybe a good way of relating it would be like as if you had a dream about somebody, and that somebody had a dream that you visited them. That you then went through this process, right? Because dreaming or going to sleep is this idea of like, sort of a mini death or mini transition, if you will. Then your dreaming body leaves and goes and emanates somewhere, and this person.
Well, that's the analogy they give. They give the analogy of the dream body for this, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
And so then I think they're saying that like being able to do that, and we've talked about this before, being able to do that is a reward, and being able to see that is enjoyable or a reward for the person who's being able to see it. So both sides of the coin are sort of like, I don't want to say the word privilege because that word has been, coined differently nowadays, but like, but it is, and it's a privilege that we don't talk about based on merit, really based on like, your ability to do these things because you've been practicing them. Everybody has the ability to, but some people make the effort to practice, and then do this on a regular basis.
I mean, I think we started the whole thing talking about the idea of like different ways of what enlightenment might mean, like high enlightenment ideas, low enlightenment ideas. Not to say low in like a pejorative sense or something, but people can't think of this in different ways. And obviously, this is a high idea.
Yeah.
Right. Like Rocky Mountain High, toked out of your mind high.
It's a here's a good
here's a high idea.
It's a benefit.
Yeah, you could do it that way. Yeah.
It's a benefit of your practice. It's a benefit of your karma. It's a benefit of, the efforts that you've put into it.
Yeah. There's some idea, like, again, people frame it in different ways. Some people say it's a reward of your practice in the sense that it's very enjoyable to you, but also will help other people. So that kind of, fits the idea of that. There's no doubt that it, like in the Dalai Lama's point of view, this is part of compassion too.
Yeah.
Because you're reaching out to other living things, visualizing yourself in this form. I mean, the word that they use is yidam, YIDAM, right? And so this is part of the yidam visualization. You visualize yourself as like, okay, now I'm not just Eric living in Chicago or whatever. Now there's a part of me that's like expanding out everywhere, right? In this divine form. And it isn't like the point that like, even that you're supposed to become Tara exactly, or whoever you happen to like. It's just that, you're meditating on what the divine form is by using this visualization.
And it's a transcendent, it's transcending you, the limited view of you.
Yeah. So the thing about it that got me about this and trying to like, again, prepping my side of this thing was the idea like, okay, this is a concept of like what enlightenment is, but on an everyday level, it's like a meditation that you do. You just kind of do this visualization. And as I was putting this stuff together, I was thinking, yeah, there's this big idea. And I definitely feel like in this podcast, we should like, as honestly as possible, present the big idea.
Yeah.
Right. But we also like want to talk about the part that like, well, what does this do for you on your everyday? Right. And the thing is, it connects to this energy level of a person.
Yeah.
It's kind of based on the energy of the person. And doing this visualization is considered to be transforming or purifying or sorting out of this energy level of who you are. So again, even if you're not popping out as like Tara all over,
right,
and like, you're still doing this meditation, and it changes how you feel. It changes. It works on your energy. You use your mind to work on your energy. Sometimes we work on our body to change our mind, right? This is like working on your mind to affect the your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of your idea of like you got your phone and you kind of get the new software download like through Wi-Fi or something.
Mm-hmm.
You got it, right? It's kind of like that, this idea that you use your mind, to affect the hardware. You're doing the software to
Mm-hmm.
affect the hardware, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is a software meditation. You're meditating on this thing, but with the theory, the goal, the idea that when you tweak with the software in this way, you start affecting the hardware.
Yeah.
Start rewiring the
Yeah.
hardware.
Yeah.
So that's what's supposed to be happening here. So even if you're like, well, I'm supposed to imagine like I'm appearing as some like Tibetan figure I don't know shit about.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really like not totally the point in
No,
some
it's not.
level.
That's not the point.
The point is that you're kind of doing these visualizations, and these visualizations are tweaking parts of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and I guess this is our closer for this episode, but like
Yeah.
sometimes people will talk about this with Carl Jung, the psychologist, and
Mm.
the idea of the collective unconscious, and that these figures that you're visualizing are like archetypal figures.
Mm-hmm.
Tara's like a mother archetypal figure,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
or Yamantaka is like the lord of overcoming death, the destroyer of death. He's an
Yes.
archetype, That Shiva's an archetype and Shakti are archetypes. They're divine play of, polarized energy, right? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You could say male and female, but you can make it more than male and female.
Right.
You can 2 males, 2 females. It's all good, But the whole idea that this is like sexual energy or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are archetypes of that. Anima and animus, if you want to be all Jung
Yeah.
about it, right? The
Yeah,
male
yeah.
and female thing. So that's the point of these meditations. They're archetypal. So when you go from this big, okay, this is my Buddha nature part of who I am. Now I'm interconnecting with everything everywhere, all at once. Now I'm going to appear as this archetype. And like people have written whole books about, oh yeah, this is the Jung part of this thing. You connect into this collective unconscious, and all of a sudden, you're doing something powerful for yourself by working your mind. You're doing the software to tweak the hardware out using your thing. Yeah. So probably place we got to stop, right? Oh, I lost you. I can't hear you.
Oh, whoops. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, so probably this natural place to stop.
I think so. Yeah.
We're recording this on Thanksgiving. Daniel has to make a turkey.
But is there? Did we do? Is the what's left? Is just the mnemonikai left?
Yeah, but it's probably a little bit. So maybe what we got to do is maybe just do one little mini episode on this back in like something. We'll just like maybe do one big capper for people, and we'll cap.
Okay, fine.
Does that work for you?
That works. That works. That
cap
works.
the series rather than just like rushing it through. Oh yeah, there's this other thing. Blah blah blah. Okay.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Fuck it, we're done.
Right.
We got some other stuff to do in between, but we'll finish the series, and
yeah,
it'll be a little series for us.
Yeah,
that's cool with you, Daniel. Does that
work?
Yeah,
no, that's perfect. That's perfect.
All right, cool.
Well, so this was as always. I love talking about this stuff because this to me is this is the bee's knees. This is This is the whole thing, and these are really deep teachings, actually. For people. So I know we only have probably 100,000 people who listen to us, and in the grand scheme, that's not a ton of people. But for those select few, I hope that they find value in this, because I certainly find value in it, even though we practice it, we talk about it, we study it, even going over it over and over and over and trying to find my own words to be able to transmit it makes it real for me. It shares what I'm having, what I'm experiencing in a way that hooks and sinks in more deeply. And the hope is that does that for other people, so that maybe some other people who share it will share it with me in that way, in whatever it is that they're teaching.
Definitely have felt that way in this series. Again, in my kind of doing my side of prep for this, I was like, oh yeah, this is really clarifying how to think about this and trying to communicate to other people. It really clarifies. So I've been really grateful for that for us in doing this.
So if if for some reason you don't get it the first time you hear it perfectly, don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Don't worry. Just I think, and even if it doesn't spark you to try to do anything other than just listen to it, that's awesome. That in itself is awesome, because this is not being talked about. And there's so many things that people could listen to. Fear porn, aka the news, political stuff, social stuff, news, sports. There's just there's so many conversations happening, and this is something that is literally the background of all of it. And to not just simply get caught up in the manifestations, but to intentionally and purposefully try and veer behind the curtain, which is actually kind of just sheer. You could see through it if you look. We're trying to do that. We're trying to
carve out a space to talk about something different, right?
Yeah, something
where it
different.
Isn't just like, okay, what did this political figure do or that political figure do, or this is what the controversy of the week is, or something like that, right?
Yeah. What did this person say? What did this person tweet? What did this person do? Like, oh boy, verbal vomit from an idiot. Surprise. Great.
Guess what? It happened again.
Oh my God, no, not
it
again.
Happened last week, and then the motherfucker did it again this week. What
Surprise.
a stutter.
Wow, geez. I'm gonna have to stop being surprised at some point.
Yeah. It's true.
Anywho's, that's where we live in, though. That's where we're operating. That's the background.
Carve out a space to talk about something different.
Yeah. So Eric, as always, deep
Thanks, Sam.
bow. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me for all this time. 2.5 years in now for sure. Yeah. We're knee deep in the game. I have a friend of mine who I saw at a party the other week, and she says when she wants to listen to us, she opens up the app and just flings on her phone and then selects one and just hits stop on one. And she's like, I'll listen to that one. She goes, unless I see it's like part one or if it's part two, then I'll go back and listen to part one and then part two later.
So she lets synchronicity decide it. She lets
the
spontaneity of synchronicity decide.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, and our audience, thank everybody for listening. It's just nice to get feedback from people sometimes. So if there's anything that, you need clarification on, we'd be happy to do it, either through the recording or, just via one-off here or there. If you're watching us on YouTube, what up? Give us a like, subscribe, share, comment. We appreciate all the traffic. Can't call it foot traffic because there's no feet on the internet, which is strange. You have to have an OnlyFans for that. But anyways, if you would share our work with folks, we definitely would appreciate it. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, the reviews do help us rank a little bit better. So we appreciate that. And that's it. So for Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.